Today on the podcast, I'm going to be speaking to a special guest, someone named Andy Goddard in London, who's a insurance agent with Allstate for Ontario. I get a lot of insurance questions, so I said, let's get Andy on the podcast to answer them because I certainly can't answer all of them. This is the London, Ontario Real Estate Podcast. Welcome back. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today. Please say hello to the masses of podcast listeners that we have and now viewers on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well, please. I was told I have to ask that way more often by everyone that I talk to. So, Andy, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do for work.
Well, yeah, hello to the masses and hello to the new YouTube followers as well. So yeah, I'm an insurance agent for both home and auto in Ontario. Allstate is the company I work for. We're not a brokerage in the sense that, we don't shop within Allstate for multiple different rates, but by that token as well, brokerages don't have access to Allstate rates. So we're a direct insurer in that regard. And so I've been with Allstate about 3 years. I started working on the service side. So taking everyone's phone calls, hey, I've moved house, or hey, I'm changing my car, making changes to policies, but now I start policies. So it's a lot more in depth in discussion of what those coverages are at the start of a policy, which is probably the most important thing to take into consideration.
Yeah. So, Andy, when I'm writing an offer for a house and I'm working with a buyer, a lot of the time I'm thinking about, well, right now I'm thinking about home to sell conditions, which is happening a lot. I'm thinking about financing conditions. I'm thinking about home inspection conditions. Sometimes I think I should probably be thinking about insurance conditions as well, which I have, put into offers before. And it's something I think some people just look at as like an oversight, like, oh, they'll get insurance, everything's fine. But what are the kind of red flags and things that you're seeing that someone should watch out for if they're buying a house? I know, one of the things I hear about, and I could be wrong on this, but is wiring, like aluminum wiring is a big one. Tell me about, what are the concerns that you're hearing about, or something that might stop someone from being able to move forward with a deal?
You're absolutely right there on the wiring, aluminium wiring, which I guess was very common for a couple of years there in the 60s, has some negative aspects to it, and it is considered more risky than copper wiring. Some insurers won't touch it. Other insurers will take it sort of under certain conditions. I think right now, and this is always changing, so it can differ. Right now, we're taking aluminium wiring at Allstate. If you have an electrician's inspection on it within the last 2 years, confirming that it's all good. Copper wiring is obviously the one that pretty much any insurer is going to take it unless it's something specifically looking at high risk. Knob and tube wiring, though, is obviously massive red flag. Yeah, thumbs down on that completely. And there are homes of that kind of age that do have knob and tube wiring, or at least still remnants of it here in London, obviously. I'm sure you've seen many of those homes yourself going in and out of areas like Old South or the Blackfriars area. They're the sort of older areas in town, and that's certainly going to be a big no-no for almost all of the mainstream insurers, the knob and tube. But yeah, aluminium, something to be aware of, because although it is in a lot of homes in London, not every insurer is going to take it. And if they do, it could increase your premium that way.
Yeah, so like something I've been telling my clients is like make sure that when we're in that conditional period that you're making sure that you can get insurance, and also the insurance rate isn't astronomically expensive for something that you have. Like the ones that I always face is, I mean, it's a concern for everyone, but water in your basement is probably not a good thing. And I mean, we've seen a lot of that in the London area over the last really several months. There's been a lot of water in people's basements, and it's been, unfortunate to see that. Obviously, this is why you want to talk to an insurance professional like yourself. And I will say for the podcast too, like every situation is different. So we have to, this podcast is more about, let's inform you about things to watch out for, and then, get the professional advice that you need along the way. But I think some people just didn't think about insurance. They just thought, oh, it's fine, I'll get insurance, everything's going to be fine. But then they thought, okay, well, there might be a massive issue here. So that's kind of the things that I'm seeing, quite a bit. So like when we're looking at a house, and then you're saying, okay, I need to get a quote for, for insurance. What's the typical process like for that? Like we should probably have some idea of the age of certain things in the home. I'm always, questioning this. Is it the buyer's responsibility? Is the seller's responsibility? I know this is like real estate discussion here. But sometimes I ask the seller and they're like, I don't know how old the plumbing is in the house. Right. So like, how do you approach that? Like, what are the kind of things that people should be prepared for if someone gives you a call and says, hey, I need to get insurance on my house?
Yeah, so we've mentioned electric, obviously, and talking about plumbing, those two things, if there hasn't been a known full upgrade of all the wiring and all the outlets for the electrical and the panel, and for the plumbing, if there hasn't been a known upgrade of all the plumbing in the property, we go with the original year of the home. Um, Typically, so a lot of homes from sort of the 60s, 70s in London. And if you maybe it was upgraded in 2010, but if you don't know that, it's just going to go down as the 60s. And relatively speaking, that's not necessarily going to have the highest impact on your premium. But there's many other things that do factor into the rate, and particularly for existing home buyers who are maybe buying a new home. You got to be aware that actually maybe your current insurance provider isn't going to be the best option for you for your new home. Different insurance companies have a different appetite for different parts of the market. They might want certain types of homes. They may see, townhouses might be a preference for a particular company and they get preferred rates. Detached homes might be a preference for another company and they might get preferred rates based on that. And the value of homes is changing all the time. And one key thing to notice is that when you get given your breakdown of the insurance coverage limits, the dwelling rebuild cost, which is what we would refer to, the actual main property itself, so the home, not including the detached things, that may not match your real estate cost. And a lot of people get worried or concerned about that. But for instance, I had a client recently who just bought their home for I think 750. The rebuild cost of the home was coming in the 500s, and they were concerned, like, hang on, I've just bought the home for much more than that.
Yeah.
But it's actually about rebuilding the house, not the overall property price. It's not necessarily matched to real estate prices.
So it's not including like the lot. Obviously, you own the land that's underneath the house.
Yeah,
Typically, not always, but yeah, typically.
to a certain point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To a certain point, yeah, that's something to think about. I think as well as we kind of get into these insurance questions. Andy, I know you're not the ruler of the insurance industry, but I've had clients mention to me that insurance premiums seem to be going up. Like one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't know if this is related in any way, but there's been a lot of flooding obviously happening in London over the last say year or so. Why is that happening, I guess is my general question. Why are premiums going up, but we're getting the same coverage, we would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head with one of the aspects is claims are up, and that's based on weather. Like you said, we've had a lot of flooding recently in Ontario. I mean, those pictures coming out of Toronto were quite something else.
Yeah.
And not only in Ontario though, so even though sort of your policy is regulated provincially, all of Canada really pays for all of Canada's claims, essentially. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but in general, there's massive wildfires out in Alberta. Jasper obviously got hit really hard, and BC is quite prone to that as well. And so where these catastrophic weather-related incidents are increased, there's a higher number of claims across the country. That really does drive up people's premiums. Is how are companies going to pay out those premiums? Well, there's also something called reinsurance. That's a topic for another time, maybe. So insurance companies have insurance on the payouts that they do, but the majority of the payouts come from people's premiums. You and I, we have home insurance. We pay a little bit into a large pool, and then the claims essentially are paid out from that pool. So claims obviously is one aspect of the increase, and sort of as a knock-on effect of that, the cost to repair and the labor that goes into repairing homes is then more, simply because we've seen huge inflation really over the last few years in Canada. Obviously, everything comes at a premium. The one really easy thing to point at is the wood prices during COVID, when everyone was, going to build their home decks, and then their quotes that they did have, then they had to pay sort of double, maybe even triple in some instances for that, what they were originally quoted. And that's really it. It's the price of materials, the price of labor on repairing everything, is really only increasing over time. Unfortunately, yeah, the claims of the fewer do pay. We are paying that through the premiums of the many. That's unfortunately just the nature of how insurance works in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not blaming you, Andy, for all of our problems, but I mean, I do think, yeah, it's just something that I kind of hear a little bit about as we're going through this process of getting someone home insurance. So, one of the things that if you haven't bought a house before, maybe you haven't bought a house in a long time, one of the things you will need before you purchase a house, if you have a mortgage, is insurance. So I think one of the things that I've learned about this conversation so far is that we need to make sure that we ask those questions in advance of potentially even putting in an offer if there is going to be a potential red flag for insurance. Or, hey, you're in conditional period. Let's just make sure you call the insurance company like yourself, get a quote, make sure that you're okay with that before you firm up your deal. And I think that's something that I've seen sometimes is like, okay, you have a house closing. Okay, what's the age of this? What's the age of this? It's like, okay, we could have answered these questions, a little bit a while back, and that's something the lawyer obviously always asks for. But as the real estate kind of generalist here, I do kind of try to remind my clients, make sure you get insurance, make sure that you call and get that kind of in place. And I think something I can probably, do even more is make sure that those people are having that conversation again well in advance of when we're doing that. Andy, I'm curious, like, is there any like ways to save money on your insurance? I know, you get the quote, but sometimes I hear about like I went to Western University, so I get like a quote, I get a better quote at certain insurers, or if I go to a certain, a certain association or something that you belong to. What are your kind of, any tips around that, or some way that someone can save money on their insurance premiums? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned sort of in there as well was about mortgages, and that lawyers want you to provide it so that they can then also provide it to the mortgage company. A lot of lawyers are now actually stipulating that you need insurance on the home. They won't close a home without insurance, even if you don't have a mortgage.
Oh,
So
that
that's
makes
one thing
sense.
worth noting.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
think it's a liability thing really on the lawyer's part. I mean, I don't know the exact reason, but my guess is, they don't want to be liable for not having recommended or not having told you to get insurance on that
Yeah, and,
property.
and I mean, if you own a $700,000 house and you don't have insurance, even if you don't have a mortgage, I mean, that seems a little silly to me. But hey, I just always think about that. So okay, sorry. Thanks for
Fully
clarifying
agree. Yeah, well, then as a knock-on effect of that, when you do end up paying your mortgage off, if you end up paying your mortgage off, it's a tough one, but most insurance companies do have a mortgage-free discount, or maybe in reverse, you pay more if you have a mortgage on the property. So always let your insurance company know if you are successful in paying your mortgage off, because that is certainly one way that you can save is don't have a mortgage. That's not necessarily going to change whether you take the mortgage out in the first place, but maybe as you get closer to the end of the mortgage and you're weighing up that cash flow situation, pay the mortgage off quicker, lower insurance payments over time. Other ways that you can save, group policies like you mentioned. Western have preferred rates at some insurance companies, Fanshawe, workplaces. So I know that there's maybe like 20 or so workplaces in London that I can think of off the top of my head that have a preferred rate with Allstate. And there's provincially, not just in London, but because it's regulated provincially. So I could write a policy for somebody that has a group in Ottawa, even from where I sit at my desk here in London, or my home desk in
Nice.
London. Other ways to get discounts on your policy, really shop around. And I know the companies don't want you to shop around so much, but ultimately they incentivize you into the the companies, bring you in. There's always some kind of incentivization to acquire new clients. So shop it every year, really. Why be overpaying for the right amount of coverage for you?
Yeah.
Because things are always changing in insurance. There's always new kinds of discounts coming out. There's always new ratings. Sometimes you'll be a little bit higher here, sometimes you'll be a little bit lower here. You don't know if you don't check it out each year. And typically, it's going to take that 30-minute phone call or face-to-face meeting in the first year. Then the next year, they've already got most of your details on file, unless you change a car here or there. So the process of it is quicker each year for you. So shop around each year is one big way to find some discounts. And I did have one other thing to mind. The other way to get a discount, good credit actually gets a good discount. So if you have good credit, and maybe you have bad credit, sorry, and you know that you're going to improve it over time. Now, not every insurance company runs it in the same way. And at least where I am, I don't see a credit score. We run something called an insurance score, but it's based on credit elements and your previous insurance history as well. If you purchased your home 5 years ago and your maybe your insurance score was not as great at that time, but then you have improved it over time, get the insurance company to run your credit score again if that's something that they do, because many do, and that can help lower your rates there.
Nice.
Like I said, lots of different ways to lower that premium, but just always make sure you're getting the right coverage as well. I never try to encourage people to lower their coverages as a way to save, but it is possible. Another thing you can do is increase your deductible. Typically, I see most people have either a $500 or $1,000 deductible, but really, most things under $1,000 as a homeowner, you're probably going to fix anyway. It's an inconvenience, but are you really going to claim something for $750 that then maybe, depending on the type of claim, might increase your premium in the next year or for a certain period of time? I really try and discuss the deductible situation, because for some people that is a cash flow thing. But if you can raise your deductible to maybe $2,500, you're going to save a little bit of premium here and there.
Got you. Okay. Andy, thank you so much for the insurance portion of the podcast. I appreciate you, joining the podcast. Maybe before we go into the next segment of the podcast, and this might be a bit of a surprise for you, but I'm curious on, how can people get a hold of you if they do have, further insurance questions?
Okay. Yeah. So you can get me at andygoddard.ca, ANDYGODDARD.ca.
Perfect.
Or 519-694-4427. Text me or call me at that number. And email address is agoddard@allstate.ca.
Perfect. Okay. So next part of the segment of the podcast, Andy, I ask everybody this because you live in London and you're a London person like I am. Can you give me a couple places in London? This is the Phil's favorite segment of the podcast. Give me 2-3 places in London that and I did not prepare Andy for this in any way. As you can see, the terror on his eyes, but I think this is going to be more fun this way. So give me an idea of, just 2-3 places. These do not have to be your favorite, but just places that you like going, places that maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's a store, somewhere that we can support, a local business. You can say a big chain as well, whatever you think.
I will be a bit of a sucker to a big chain. One of my favorite places in London is Krabby Joe's. When I first came to Canada 9.5 years ago, I visited in the February, and then I moved out here in the July time. So my partner is from. So I came out to visit in the February. I went into Krabby Joe's in that sort of 2 weeks I was here, and it became a place that we ended up going together a lot. So sentimental reasons. I know it's a bit more of a chain aspect, but yeah. This I do have a big love. My kids love Krabby Joe's now as well. This is not an endorsement for Krabby Joe's. Let me think of some local
Krabby
places.
Joe's is awesome. I have no issue with it. I think it's a great one. I love going. I go there. It's awesome. Yeah, it's
We
great.
used to do when we first were, still dating before we were engaged and married now. But we used to do the Krabby Joe's downtown, followed by on a Tuesday for wing night, followed by cheap Tuesday movie night at City Plaza there as well. So
When you could go to
it's
movies. I feel like now that I've have a kid, I can't go to movies anymore. I'm like I watch them on the internet pretty much. I watch them on like Netflix. That's the
yeah,
option that I have. Any
Disney
any
Plus.
others you want to share with the podcast viewers here?
Um, Trying to think of some of my favorites. My favorite place for shawarma is Beirut Bites on Wellington. It's right by the Allstate office, so I go in there frequently for lunch. But Shadi, the owner in there, great guy. He's the kind of guy who I walk in and he's like, you want a chicken on a Saj bread? Yes, I do. Yeah, that personal touch. It is the best shawarma. I love that place. Favorite bites on Wellington. The What else locally do I love? I mean, I love just going to Covent Garden Market for a walk around. Obviously, real
Yeah.
local place. So, we used to live downtown, and again, maybe it's just me being sentimental, but yeah, we used to live right by Covent Garden Market. Maybe about 9 years ago, maybe. Yeah, about 8 years ago. Yeah, I've been here 9 years. Yeah, 8 years. Covent Garden Market, I love that place. The tea house, they do a really nice tea blend that I love. Obviously, as a Brit, you could
Your
hear it in
English
the
roots
accent. So
are
yeah,
coming back. Yeah.
yeah. The tea house there does a great.
That's
It's called
awesome.
Duke of Earl. It's a nice blend. Love that
Nice.
one.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And I have to ask you one more question before we leave the podcast for today, Andy. Did you get the Oasis tickets? I know we're all big Oasis fans. Are you gonna go back to your home country and go see Oasis?
Counting myself very lucky, yes. I did get up whatever ridiculous o'clock time it was. I did nudge my wife. I was saying, get on and get the tickets. And she was trying to get on, and nothing was loading for her. But I was up a little bit before her. Yeah, I was about 1,000th in line, I think. I managed to get 2 Oasis tickets for Wembley next year. So, as long as we can now afford some flights after
Yeah.
paying Ticketmaster prices, yeah, we'll be going to England to see Oasis half the world away.
Well, that's amazing. Well, congratulations on that. That's I'm a little jealous. I'll be very honest with you, but you'll have to live vicariously through your Instagram on that one.
Absolutely.
Andy Goddard, thank you so much. If you have insurance questions, again, I will put the Andy's contact information in the show notes. Again, this is the London, Ontario Real Estate Podcast. My name is Phil Bailey. I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario with the HouseSigma team. If you have any questions for me, just a question, a idea for a future podcast, text me 226-977-2348, or you can check out and learn a little bit more about me at philbailey.ca. Thanks, Andy, for joining again, and I hope you have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much for having me, Phil.